My parents kicked me out at 18, leaving me homeless. Years later they broke into my house to squat while I was away. I'm a 30-year-old guy and my parents never really wanted kids. I was an only child and from what I've been told an accidental pregnancy. As a kid, things were fine, but as I grew older my parents became more distant, focusing entirely on their business. I barely knew my extended family and my birthdays and holidays were mostly ignored by my parents, who just gave me money and left me to celebrate alone. By the time I turned 18 they kicked me out, even getting an official eviction notice, and offered no help when I struggled. I worked part-time and rented a cheap apartment, but eventually lost my job and went broke. After being homeless for a while, a kind neighbor helped me reconnect with my estranged grandparents. They were shocked by my situation and immediately took me in. They supported me, helped me get back on my feet, and eventually sold me their house when they retired. Years later, after being away for work, I came home to find my parents squatting in my house claiming squatters' rights. Their business had gone bankrupt, and they expected to live in my home rent-free. After months of them refusing to leave and making my life difficult, I took them to court and won the eviction. It was ironic because they had thrown me out without a second thought when I turned 18. Now they had to deal with finding a small cheap apartment just like I had years ago. Looking back, I realize how little they cared for me and I have no regrets for kicking them out. An update: I drove my mother over to see the tiny and crappy studio apartment in the next city over because it was the only thing they could find on such short notice, and the apartment was terrible. The walls were baby barf green, the carpet looked like it was 20 years old, the only window just had a view of a brick wall outside, there was no dishwasher, the stove was the smallest one I'd ever seen, and the toilet looked like it really needed to be replaced. The walls also did little to stop noise from neighbors. There was already 2 people loudly fighting in the adjacent apartment while we were there. My mother went out of her way to try and give me sad looks while dropping hints that I should be feeling guilty that I was reducing them to live in such a place. But I just acted oblivious to it all until she finally stopped. They signed the lease right away and moved what little stuff they had into the apartment over the weekend. They also ended up demanding the queen-size bed, dresser and flat-screen TV from my guest room. I told them to just take the damn things because I no longer wanted them in the house after they spent 5 months sleeping in that room. They looked at me like I was treating them as though they were diseased and demanded nothing more. The moment they had to leave for good, I started changing the locks on all exterior doors. All their stuff was at the apartment, and they'd spent their last night in my guest room. They watched me start ripping the old lock off the front door as they were getting into the van. They said nothing, I said nothing, but they just sat and watched me for a while until I had the new doorknob on. Then they finally left. I breathed a massive sigh of relief the second that van went down the road. I figured karma had finally come for them, and they could live under a rock for all I cared. But nope, my grandparents heard from them recently. They'd called them to brag that had a new business similar to their old one in the same state as I'm living in now, and they are basically on track to be right back to where they used to be in life prior to the pandemic, which was making good money and looking down on others. I've already googled their new business, and it seems like it's doing well. They have many positive reviews and everything. I'm pretty fucking resentful, truth be told. They put me through being homeless, squatted for next to free at my house for months, then went right back to being the snobby wine drinking business people they used to be. If karma is real, it's taking too damn long. Edit: I would like to thank everyone for all the constructive advice, and many of the points that are being made on selling the house I'm realizing have merit. I've asked my grandparents if it'd be a good idea if I moved closer to them. They told me that if I want to sell the house, then to go right ahead. My parents will have no clue where I am if I move away, so I'm heavily considering it now. I'm gonna see if the company I work for can transfer me down south. I think I wouldn't mind the warmer climate anyway. I've hated winter since the time I had to live in a tent. I don't have many friends where I currently am as I'm kind of a loner, so it wouldn't be too hard to start over somewhere farther away. I'm attached to this house, but it's not like I grew up in it, so I will consider moving. Yes, I understand the need for more cameras, and we'll be looking into that. As for those wondering how my parents broke in and fooled police, well, it's stupidly simple. My parents got in through a window I forgot to lock. They just pulled the screen off and opened it to get right in. Then they found my spare house keys I kept hanging on a hook near the kitchen and copied them. When claiming squatters' rights to police as well as saying we had a prior verbal agreement, my parents presented working house keys to the cops and lied their little asses off saying I'd let them move in. My parents had also already filed for an address change with the DMV online before I'd even gotten home, and showed police a printout of that they'd made, and said that their new IDs with my address were soon to be in the mail. The cops just looked annoyed, told me it was a domestic issue, and to file to evict them like a normal person. I wish I'd gotten their badge numbers to report them. Small addition: yes, my parents had their mail redirected to my house, which is another thing they used to claim residency. The thing is that if they'd lived in my house for more than 30 days with permission, squatters' rights would make them tenants. They claimed they had my permission and used every dirty trick at their disposal to convince police they had the right to be there. There was no way for them to confirm or deny how long my parents had been living in the house, and it turned into a situation of everybody pointing fingers and police didn't know who to believe. That's why I had to go to court to evict them. I did refuse to give my parents the Wi-Fi password while they lived with me though, since they were not contributing to that utility. However, they just used their smartphones to run a mobile hotspot and got internet that way the whole time they were squatting in my house. Those of you saying that I should leave bad reviews, or expose my parents' past. There really is no point. I'm gonna take the high road there and just forget about them. However, if they committed fraud to start that new business of theirs, then I'll get some popcorn when that comes back on them, because they'd inevitably call someone for help. Edit 2. For those who don't believe the 30-day thing with squatters, here's a direct USA law on the matter. In most areas, anyone who lives on your property for more than 30 days with permission can claim rights, as in the eyes of the law they become your tenants. When this happens, you will usually need to carry out an eviction procedure. However, in the case where permission was never given and an unoccupied property is forcibly entered and lived in, there are still rules you must follow. My parents falsified permission and lied about how long they'd been in my house. That's why it took 5 months to get rid of them. Now you know. Update: 5 days later, well, I decided to make some inquiries and spent a couple of days asking around the family about how my parents got their new business off the ground. It's pretty unusual that they were able to come back from bankruptcy and get a new business started in under 2 years. No, it's not a multi-level marketing scheme for those who thought so. Even my parents wouldn't resort to doing that crap. They undoubtedly think multi-level marketing schemes are beneath them. My parents' new business is comparatively smaller than their previous one too. I'd say about half the size. Before they had at least 2 employees. Now it's just the 2 of them. Someone pointed out I should be watching my credit for identity theft. I already was and have been since I first started dealing with my parents squatting in my house. I put nothing past them, and they knew it. Honestly though, I'm not sure they even bothered to remember my legal information in the past decade anyway. Hell, I'm not sure they bothered to even remember how to spell my first name. But I did lock down my credit, and there has been no unusual activity on it at all. So my parents didn't try to steal their company funds from me, at least. My paternal grandparents, or my good grandparents one would say, are the ones who actually give a damn about me. And they have no idea where my parents got their money to open up shop again. My parents have called them numerous times since they disinherited my father, and they have been refusing to take their calls since they called to brag about their new success a while ago. It's clear my parents had no help from my father's side of the family. So then what about my mother's? Well, I still had that old list of contacts my parents gave me filed away, and on that list was the landline number for my maternal grandmother. I did try calling my maternal grandmother back when I was homeless. She did not give a damn. I've never met them in person, but my maternal grandparents are a lot like my parents. Guess my father truly found his soulmate with my mother. As a previous commenter pointed out, they were made for each other. I managed to get in touch with my maternal grandmother once again, and not only was she long divorced from her husband, my maternal grandfather is no longer alive. That was news to me, but he passed away 7 months ago, and he left my mother a sizable inheritance. So yeah, that's where they got the money to open up shop again. My maternal grandmother sounded so proud of them too. She had little interest in speaking of much else, and it's likely why my parents called my grandparents to brag about how they are so successful again. They wanted to rub salt in the wound since my good grandparents cut them off. I really don't care though, and neither do my good grandparents. Everyone on my paternal side of the family all say my parents can go kick rocks. They want nothing to do with them. I'm not the only one my parents have jaded. My mother's side of the family are full of divorcees and drunken loners who all hate each other and just pretend to act civil. My father's side are what I'd call just very normal and nice people. My father though burned bridges time and time again. When I was born, my grandparents wanted to be in my life, but for some reason my parents kept me from them. Why they did this I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's because they didn't want to be judged on their own parenting. I'd have been happier if they'd sent me to boarding school, or to live with my grandparents. But I guess narcissists aren't truly happy if they don't have someone else to put down. I can only imagine the stuff they said about me behind my back my entire life. Either way, it seems my parents did nothing illegal to open up a new business. Nothing that can be reported to something like the IRS anyway. No law against using funds from inheritance as seed money to self-employment. My mother, like me, was an only child, so she got everything when her father died, including his house and land. That's where my parents are living now. I've seen a photo my maternal grandmother sent me. Not the nicest house, but not bad. Comparable to my own, I'd say. But it means my parents have a place to live scot-free now, and likely won't need to bother me again. I want to sell my house and move, but it turns out the company that I'm in the employ of has no branch in Arizona. So it's either I quit and look for new employment in Arizona after selling my house, or I just stay where I am and hope my parents leave me alone. I'm looking into job searching, because I really don't want my parents to ever find me again. I won't move if it's not feasible, but I'd prefer to be able to. It'd be moot to bother getting more cameras for the house if I want to sell it ASAP. But if I end up stuck here because of not being able to find another job in Arizona in the coming months, then I might as well get cameras installed inside and out. I've gotten a lot of good advice on the kinds of cameras to get, and where to put them. I kind of doubt the same situation will ever repeat, but I just don't want my parents to ever try to seek me out again for any reason. If they need help when they're old, I'm not gonna care. They'll get what they gave, nothing. They're dead to me for the rest of my life, and the rest of my father's side of the family say the same. If I ever become a parent or step-parent, I'll make damn sure I never become like my parents. No child deserves that.